Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. We'll give everybody just a minute to show up to get into the room. We were just conducting a little experiment here. We thought we'd put on some wildflowers and see if anybody had an allergic reaction. It seems to work on all of us, or maybe that's the actual pollen in the air. It's always beautiful, but it's always a tough time of year for those of us who suffer from a little hay fever. All right, and Karina's and drop in the information again into the chat for today's resources. And I'm going to get started. Welcome to the CALPADS network. It's our final meeting for the year. I've seen many of you in person this year. It's been great. Just so we know, so we have a record. If you are here, if you don't have if you're joining us via phone or something, make sure you rename yourself to include your LEA name in case we have to get back to you on anything, or if there's a question you may have. We have a pretty small group, but generally prefer if you could drop your questions in the chat. But occasionally, if it's easier to come off mute, you can always just raise your hand. If we can't answer questions, which we usually, hopefully we don't go too far out of our field, and we'll have Shaun and she can answer hopefully any questions that we can't answer. But just in case, you can always give us the questions in the chat, and we will we'll always answer those in follow-up. And we are recording this for later reference. We'll always timestamp it so you can find your way back to anything that we may cover. I'm joined by my awesome team here from the Accountability and Data Literacy Unit. I've got Dr. Hilary Weissman here. Hello, Hilary, Karina Nahara, and Roy Lung. Jeremy is on special assignment and through May, so he'll be back here this summer. But I just got back from my spring break. It was a spring break / college visitation. My daughters are both heading off to college next year, my twins, so it was fun, memorable, but of course really sad, and music can have that impact. So I don't know, what do you guys listen to when you're looking to get away, whether it's physically getting away or just mentally getting away? Sometimes I'm sure right now you might need a mental getaway. Drop that in the chat. Love to see what it is, see who jibes with me. Yeah, I'm a Gen Xer, so of course I'm listening to the 80s music on that drive, subjecting my daughter to the best of the 80s. What do you guys listen to when you're hoping to? Mike, a little EDM, all right. Yadira, yeah, the oldies but the goodies, the Beatles. Funny, early punk. Hey, industrial, that's pretty funny. Alex, I'm with you on the yacht rock. I will do the yacht rock on occasion. I love that. Salsa, chill hop, Cascade. David, you're yeah, all right. Got some interesting Shelley, cool. Yeah, the hard rock for the adrenaline. Yes, I have. It's funny, the sound system in my car now, if I'd had that when I was 16, I would probably be deaf. I'm pretty sure. All right. And speaking of it, Shelley, I think if you are leaving us at the end of the year, if you're retiring or moving to a different, leaving the state for some reason, drop it in the chat. I'd love to know. We want to make sure we are aware if you're not going to be back next year for any reason. I mean, hopefully good reasons, but if you won the lottery, if you are retiring, let us know in the chat. Of course, Jaime. Of course, Slayer, Megadeth, and Metallica. You wouldn't know to look at him, but Jaime is a rocker. All right, so our agenda today, we will just do just some upcoming meetings, I think, that are you're probably on all your radars, but just in case. Then we're going to go through some of the general updates that have come through via the most recent regional meeting, as well as through some of the CalPads flashes that I think maybe need some clarification. That includes LTEL data and reports, some ELPAC and reclassification information, And then talk about sunbucks. I know it's probably not the most exciting thing, but I think there's some confusion out there, and I just wanted to kind of walk through it, make sure everybody's clear on that. I have a quiz too, so just you got to listen carefully. And then we're going to go through some of our CalPADS end of year resources, including those of you who were not able to join us for the statewide training series that culminated on April 1st here at LACO. I'm going to share some of those amazing resources. It is funny, I just logged in to share one of the pages, and I realized that our presenter, Rebecca Aguilar from Fresno County, is currently presenting in another county, and I saw everybody's logged in. But these are great resources, so if you weren't here, I think you should you'll benefit from having access to these. And then also we have Shaun Walker is going to join us in just a little bit, and she'll be available for any questions you may have at the end. She said she'd join us around 9:30. So if you have any questions for Shaun, hold back and dropping them in chat until she's logged into the room. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll break away for our vendor breakouts, as always, from our student information system vendors. So the purpose, I always want to clarify, because I do feel like there's so many great resources for CalPADS, including the series that we brought to you earlier. But we are here to try to share any kind of information, timely information, anything that's happening. We have one thing you guys may have been on your radar, but a recommended change in the order end of year, which just kind of I just heard about just the other day. So hopefully you've heard about it before I did. But I'll share it anyway later when we get there. Then also to provide feedback to the CDE, and now it's great because CDE actually joins us, so that's nice. They can hear it directly, but it's really helpful to get your information up to them. Trying to always build the CalPADS impact and reach, and that's where I think our biggest area of need for us is LACO, is to get the information beyond the CalPADS coordinators and out to other people, and hopefully we have some of those other people joining these. We try to make this as meetings as accessible as possible, so that people who are new to CalPADS, or just either brand new to the role or very interested in supporting CalPADS submissions for the clean data and the benefits of that, can get into our meetings and understand what we're talking about, and aren't overwhelmed with data discrepancies and things like that are probably a little too technical. And so we are looking for ways that we can expand our reach, because I know that there's a lot of other great technical supports out there, including our friends at CSIS. But we want to fill a niche that I think that they don't necessarily fill, which is helping our CalPADS coordinators expand their support network within their LEAs. We have our Canvas page up for today. I'm just going to share real quick the stuff we have on there. So we dropped in the links, but usually you get to the home page here, and this is of course my view, but I just want to make sure under the modules section we keep any of the resources, and you can go back. This is kind of a nice digital library for any of the materials, and we've uploaded a lot of the stuff that the flashes that have come in, the end of year training announcement that went out from CDE at the end of March. There's also this nice link from the March regional updates meeting. This links to the YouTube video, and it's timestamped all the topics. So if you need to go back and review one of those, make sure you look at it. Then we have our presentation from the CalPADS statewide leadership training, as well as the end of year checklist from CSIS and CDE. The vendor links up here for when we break out. Make sure you know where those are, and we'll drop those in the chat before we leave. And then the agenda for today have all sorts of links. It looks like I have to do some updating here. I forgot to put in a couple of things under the updates, but the flashes, you just saw where those are, and we have other links. So anyway, let me get back to where we were just a second ago. What we always like to refer people out for the technical support. CSIS and their CalPADS Q&A on Wednesdays, very technical. Definitely not a place if you're just a school district or a charter school administrator trying to understand CalPADS a little bit better. That gets really into the weeds. I think a lot of people in the room right now probably are in those meetings pretty regularly. So, but if you aren't, they're definitely a good place to start checking in, and they also record those and post them to their YouTube channel. The regional meetings, there's one more coming up, and as I mentioned, the last one in March, the resources are posted, in our Canvas page. Then we have our just the flash page, the LEA listserv. If you're not part of that, I monitor those, so I see some of the things coming up, but it's always a great resource for you to ask questions of other people and get a lot of your questions answered from your colleagues around the state. And then the training resource page and the CSIS YouTube channel, those are all really helpful, and we'll talk a little more about some of the things that'll be posted on the YouTube channel in just a second. So mark your calendars. CSIS, these are upcoming or ongoing meetings. So like I just mentioned, you've got the ongoing weekly CalPADS Q&A. Hopefully you're joining those. CDE Special Education Data Office Hours. I know they have at least one more coming up on April 28th next week. And then there's one more regional update meeting coming in May, and that's the registration link is included in there. So I think that'll be looking forward to what is coming next year. They did some of that at the last meeting as well, but I think there's a few other things, some big news coming around the corner about the end of year in 25-26 going to be realigned, I think. Then the CSIS end of year trainings are all being posted. These are being shared in Bridge. If you don't have a Bridge account, and it's limited, I don't have a Bridge account. I wish I did, but if you don't have a Bridge account, they do eventually get posted on YouTube. But the data population and the reporting and certification are on YouTube only. Those are already posted. And as you can see, some of these.
This meeting is being recorded.
So some of the end of year data population or end of year ones are for Primer, and others have already posted or will be about to be posted. So make sure you check those out. The Special Education Data Roadshow is coming to LA County. It is limited, as generally speaking, it's supposed to be for your special education and SELPA folks. However, LACOs will include a virtual online version. So you could try to register. I submitted my registration, and I was put on a wait list. I don't know if that means it's a forever wait list, because I would think that with the virtual they have more access. But generally we haven't been able to go to those, or space available, and with LA County being as big as it is, there's usually not a lot of space. But if you'd like to join, Brandy and Dominic virtually, I think they'll let you in virtually. And here's some of the topics listed here. So I'm going to try to join that as well. There's a lot of information that'll be coming down the pike for that, and obviously end of year 3 and 4, a lot of information to be shared during that. Then for next year, the LA County, us, CalPADS network, we've got the following dates identified. I'm going to put up the tentatively, because what happened last year may happen again this year, which is we put our dates out there, and then the CalPADS regional meetings get published and they conflict, so we have to move things around. But I think these should be pretty safe. I looked at this year's dates. So these are the 3 dates we want to put on the calendar. The meetings, again, are always virtual, so 9 to 10:30, with that last half hour being SIS vendor check-in. And if you're already registered, if you're here now, we're going to roll everybody's registration over. We don't have the OMS link set up yet, but we'll roll everybody over, and you'll get an announcement of that, and you'll get the Zoom link as well. But we are trying to build some additional, so we're trying to add some additional meetings. I think this year was great with the CalPADS statewide leadership series. And at the end of that, I was talking to the folks from CSIS and saying, this has been great, great opportunity, and we'd love to do more of these type things. And they said, well, yeah, we'll ask the people in the survey, if they need more of this. I'm like, well, the people who are in the room are probably going to say, no, we just went through it. And I don't know that we got the information out to everybody. So there are a few areas where I think we can add on, like I said, in next year. So I'd love to get some feedback, and you don't have to do it right now, but at some point before you leave today, make sure you fill out our feedback form, because I added there some potential topics and an open-ended question for next year. And so what I'm proposing, what we'd like to do is find some spaces where we could do some office hours type focused areas to help build capacity, not just of the CalPADS coordinators, but also other staff, whether it's LEA accountability administrators or assessment administrators. I don't think I added assessment as a component there, but that would be another one we could be very clear on. So CalPADS, as it relates to this particular area, CTE, for example, that's an area we get a lot of questions that bubble up around that. And so I added some questions just to rank them, what you think, whether your level of interest or someone you know would be interested in those types of things. I'd love to get your feedback on that. And if you have any ideas of things that we may have forgotten or that you think are the real pressing issue, again, we're not going to be super technical. We tend to focus more on the areas where we can help those who support you. So folks who are kind of outside the CalPADian world. But we would love you to have something relevant to you as well. So you can come as a team and it will be virtual. So make sure you fill those out when you have a chance today, and we'll post it again at the end. So let's get into some of the general updates. So this is kind of important. I've been getting a lot of questions about this because I think, with CalPADS, with long-term English learners having been added to the dashboard this last year and having had a lot of reds on the dashboard for long-term English learners, it's become a very high priority for districts and charter schools to support their long-term English learners, and also just to know who are their long-term English learners. And so there's a two-phase effort to make long-term English learners more apparent in CalPADS. And this is the definition of English learners specific to accountability that's spelled out in California Ed Code 52052, right? And so where we should see these in May are in two reports, the cohort outcome reports. So these are accountability reports, 15.1 and 15.2. So you have a filter for both of those and a yes/no column for both those for long-term English learners, especially 15.2. You'll be able to see who your current cohort, who's identified as long-term English learner. And so many of these students may no longer be English learners. They could have been reclassified on day one of 9th grade. Once they enter the cohort, they would still be considered long-term English learners for the purpose of the dashboard. And so they would appear there. So that may help you determining who these kids are, long-term English learners, for instance, on the College Career Indicator. Additionally, we'll have this cumulative enrollment extract, which will be really helpful. And there's a lot of features to that. The provisional LTEL start date. So when they, and it's ongoing, it's a rolling thing. We've talked about this, but it's 7 years, 7 calendar years. So when that starts, when did that person become a long-term English learner? Then that ELA status start date, that US initial student enrollment date, their earliest student enrollment start date, and the earliest EL status start date. So all those will be in that extract. So that should be helpful. And then next year, we'll have the end of year 3 reports. We'll have long-term English learners called out on them. Additionally, I just want to point out, and we've talked about this before, but Flash 272 pointed out, the critical nature of getting your data right. And I think what we're seeing, at least initially, we did see statewide, I've heard some, it's small, but there are definitely some kids popping up as long-term English learners who couldn't technically have been long-term English learners, like 5th graders, because needed to be 7 years, right? So there was not a way that you could have been a long-term English learner, which would suggest that there was at least a little bit of dirty data floating around still, and it probably related to either that initial US school enrollment date, which sometimes they're picking it up as a preschooler, or that English language acquisition start date. So those are the two, whichever came first. And so it's critical to be reviewing that and make sure you have all that information filled in. And Flash 272 gives you a little more specificity on that. And then, as if not to confuse matters further, right? But Shaun just sent out the CalPADS digest last week, and in that they announced that the LTEL data file is being released in SOARS, and SOARS is the Student Online Accountability Record Status System. So this is a different LTEL file. This is the old LTEL file, and this is the LTEL definition that's spelled out in Ed Code 313.1. And this includes some additional things like not making progress on the English language fluency assessment, which used to be CELT and now is ELPAC, but it's been around. This definition has been around for a while, so even some of the language looks a little dated, as well as students who are below or far below basic on the test of English, and so that's now is the CASP, which we don't use that terminology anymore, but this is the old definition, and it's going to overlap somewhat with that definition 52052, but it is slightly different because some of the students get pulled out because they are making progress on the LPAC, and they may even have scored a 3 on CASP. But anyway, so that file is going to be released. LEAs will be notified. Oftentimes, I think CalPADS coordinators also get an email, I think because it's going in SOARS, the dashboard coordinator for the school district or charter will receive that information. And this is used primarily for notifying parents. It's a parent notification that's required under law that needs to go out. And so, but these are two different definitions, slightly different student groups. So if you want to know more about the differences, there's that excellent long-term English learner webpage CDE produced. Then Flash 298 had a lot of really important stuff just to be keeping in mind at this time of year. So just that as we we're well into LPAC administration, and our colleagues in the assessment unit have been meeting regularly on their Wednesdays at 1 with a lot of your LEAs at LPAC and CASP coordinators. And so this is always a topic of conversation. You know, when do we administer our summative LPAC or alternate LPAC to those students whose scores last year, maybe they had a 4 on the LPAC last year and they just needed to pass, you know, one of the other criterion in order to be reclassified. And so the CDE is always recommended that you can push those till the very end. You don't want to create more headaches for yourself by having multiple tests. So, you know, for those students who potentially could be reclassified based on their 23-24 results, you can hold off on testing them until the end of the testing window. But if they haven't met the criteria by May 15th, then it's the time to test. You definitely want to get them tested so they don't fail to meet your participation rate requirements. So the administration window does close by May 31st. So you know, after that window closes, the 23-24 results are no longer valid for reclassification. So you definitely want to get students tested again, just to make sure that they have another year in which, if they weren't eligible to meet, they can in the next year based on the results. And then additionally, for those students who do meet the criteria, haven't been reclassified, but then they meet whatever requirement was pending, the LEAs are always recommended to update their RFEP status in CALPADS by May 15th. Don't linger, right? So because that too could create problems. You want to make sure that they're reclassified, because when they close the testing window, ETS pulls the data, and any student who is identified as an English learner, if they didn't test because they wouldn't have needed to because they've been reclassified, but they're still in that file and they're identified as an English learner, then they will be used against the district or the charter school for the participation rate, which has to be a minimum 95%. We really have to test 100% of students in the LPAC, but for the purposes of the dashboard, there's that 95% threshold. So it could be problematic if you didn't get that RFEP status updated in CALPADS by then. Making sure you assess the to be determined students. This is always fun, especially when they show up at the end of the year. And in the last couple of years, I know we've been seeing students show up throughout the year who are TBD. And so there is that requirement that they must be assessed with the initial LPAC or initial alternate LPAC within 30 days. Helpfully, though, now you've got these two data discrepancies that show up that are going to trigger in CALPADS if the student has a TBD for more than 30 days. And so those two, the data discrepancies can be found either in the data discrepancy module or if there's a submission cycle open. So when we open the end of year on May 6th, you can also look at the certification details under the summary of warnings, and you'll see that there. But this would be helpful for just tracking down any of the students who are showing that data discrepancy, or be an easy way to find those kiddos. Another reminder coming up, and I wanted to throw this in here because we just had a presentation from these folks, and I wanted to link it here. But just if you're a school district or charter school that serves students in grades 9 through 12, you're required to partner with this California College Guidance Initiative, CCGI. They're great folks, and it's really helpful. They'll match up basically what's in CALPADS, the course, and the courses with what appears on the Cal State UC doorways to make sure they're aligned, to make sure that your courses that are A through G approved are all reflected accurately. And they shared with us at this presentation they did for our DAN meeting not too long ago. I guess it was just in March. How many districts in LA County and charter schools are already partnering with them, and everybody's kind of at a different stage of implementation. You are required to partner with them by January 1st, 2026, and it may not be your job, but you'll be asked to help, no doubt, in helping to map the resources. So if you want, just I would recommend, if you want a kind of a better understanding of what they have to offer, you may share this too with the folks who really will benefit. I think forward it to your head counselor or someone, because there's a lot of information, a lot of data that will come out once this is set up that is going to be really helpful for LEAs in making sure they have clean data, and it will improve your A through G rate, the accuracy of your A through G completion rate. So it's a win-win, and it's good for the kids. Having just uploaded all the information into the UC and the Cal State application portals, I can tell you it'll be really nice when it's automated for your kids. So, and that's one of the outcomes that's beneficial for you. So I'm going to stop for a second because I just threw a lot of information at you before we move into the Sunbucks phase. Any questions that come up? Oh, thank you for dropping that in there, Karina. All right, I'm going to move on then. Talk about Sunbucks, and I know I was listening to the Q&A last Wednesday, and there were a lot of questions about. I don't know that I'm like going to answer all these perfectly, but like I said at the beginning, if you have questions about Sunbucks, and the reason I think it's really critical, Sunbucks is basically the summer EBT, and every student who's at who's eligible, who's a National School Lunch Program school will receive $120 for the summer to buy. It comes on a SNAP card, and for families with multiple students, that can be significant. So we want to make sure that our families who are eligible all receive these, but it's getting a little more complicated. It's modified somewhat. So I want to make sure everybody was clear on this, because it is kind of important as it relates to money. So let's just talk about it. And like I said, I've got a quiz, so pay attention. All right, so first of all, just so you got to know the key terminology, right? And I think you're probably all familiar with this, but the two areas that you'll hear about in reading this. By the way, all this is on CalPADS Flash 297, which just came out. It's a rather long flash, but it's definitely worth reading. And everything I've got here is kind of just pulled right out of there. So the two definitions are those students who are directly certified. So these are students who are either receiving CalFresh, CalWorks, or Medi-Cal, and so these are students in California who are at or below 185% of the federal poverty level, or they're categorically eligible for free or reduced lunch based on their status as a migrant student, homeless student, or foster youth. And this is all identified within CalPADS, pushed in oftentimes from CDSS. So there are some forms, and we want to just kind of ground ourselves in what the forms are. And so if you recall, during the pandemic, when we moved to this process of allowing or expanding the free lunch program, and there's a big expansion of CEP schools and Provision 2 schools, 2 and 3 schools, and so we started accepting for the purposes of LCFF and the count for unduplicated pupils, this alternative income form for those schools that either cannot collect National School Lunch Program forms or only collect them when they're establishing their base year. The alternative income form was a great way, because you had to collect something. So the alternative income form, which is a state form, was available to make sure you had your unduplicated pupil count accurate, which is important for your LCFF funding. The National School Lunch Program form has been around forever, right? And that's a more robust. And the problem was, once we started giving away, once we made free meals available to all students, there was less incentive for families to fill these forms out, because they're already being provided. And so getting families an accurate picture on those families became a lot more challenging, particularly when we were remote. So that's where the alternative income form came in. But the National School Lunch Program application can be used for our unduplicated pupil count too, right? So we know who those students are for LCFF purposes. They can also be used for the Sunbucks eligibility. So that's important to know. So it's a new form. And then the federal meals eligibility as well. So we know that that's the kind of the standard. And then finally, there's this new form that's been created by CDE, the Universal Benefits Application, which we'll talk about a little bit more, the UBA. And this can also be used for the unduplicated pupil count, Sunbucks, as well as the federal meals eligibility. So you're like, well, what's the difference then between National School Lunch Program and the UBA application? Aren't they interchangeable? It is a template. The UBA form is a template that CDE created that's fully compliant with the Sunbucks requirements. And it's very similar to the National School Lunch Program form, but it's not exactly the same. So there's some distinct differences. So they are not interchangeable. So it's important to understand that too. And we'll explain when you'd need one versus the other. Okay, so there are these various school types. So just kind of go down and who can use what. So if you're just a standard counting and claiming National School Lunch Program school, you're not CEP, which is Community Eligibility Provision or Provision 2. You don't have to worry about any of the other forms. You still have to, and have always been, this is the standard collecting the National School Lunch Program applications. And so you're going to just continue to do that, and any of your students who are eligible for Sunbucks would get them. And this, of course, like I said, can be used for your LCFF purposes for identifying unduplicated pupils. Then you've got your community eligibility provision or CEP schools. They are not allowed to circulate the National School Lunch Program. So for these students or for these schools, they must now collect the UBA form annually for Sunbucks. And this is a big change from their prior model, which was during base years, they would collect the form. Now they have to collect these annually. So it's going to, for CEP schools, it's going to add a little bit more legwork on your end. And then for Provision 2 schools, it's going to kind of depend on the year. So during the year when you're establishing a base year, it's required that you get the NSLP applications in. And those will serve for both your free and reduced price meal count and your UPC, but it also count for Sunbucks. And then in the years in which they're not base years, then you'd shift over to the UBA collection. So this is an annual collection, and I think that's the thing that was really hanging people up. But this is in the CalPADS flash. So this is an annual requirement. So CEP schools, these are, if your students are not directly certified or categorically eligible, will need the UBAs, right? So this is an important note. So if a kid is in your school, if it's CEP, kid is directly certified, they're in. Or if they're categorically eligible as a migrant, homeless, or foster youth. But it's those students who don't fit either of those categories, they're going to need the UBA. And then those students who are in the Provision 2 schools, as we said, they're going to have to get the National School Lunch Program application in the base year, followed by the UBA during those other years. So here's an important thing for the timeline, and this is why you have to be thinking about these already. And this, hopefully your nutrition person at your district or school is on top of these things, but undoubtedly it's going to kind of, you'll be rolled into this information or into this collection as well. But in order for students to get their Sunbucks for the upcoming summer. And good, Shaun is here, so she can answer questions. I don't get this right. So in order for students to be qualified for sorry, lost my train of thought when Shaun showed up, for Sunbucks for the summer, they need to get the information collected before July 1st, 2025. So, and they must be evaluated using these income eligibility guidelines, that's IEG, for 24-25. That'll make them eligible for the 2025 Sunbucks for this upcoming summer. It won't make them eligible for 2026, and it won't be usable for the LCFF count in the fall, but it will get them their Sunbucks for this summer. Then after July 1st, but on or before September 1st, you can evaluate students for that IEG. And that will actually be used for both the 2025 as well as the 2026, and could be used for LCFF UPC as long as they're enrolled on census day. And then after September 1st, if the students are eligible, they meet the criteria, and they're evaluated based on the IEG, they wouldn't retroactively assign the Sunbucks from 2025, but it would make them eligible for the 2026 Sunbucks, as well as applying to their LCFF UPC, and as you can see on down the line, right? So on or after July 1st, 2026 wouldn't be applicable for 2025, but it would still, again, similar to this year, be applied for the 2026-27 summer and the 2026-27 school year, I should say. So back to this, we mentioned it once, but I want to reiterate it. Who must submit this form? So this is the Universal Benefits Application. Like I said, this is at some point, if you're at some of these schools, and Shaun will probably be able to address this as well, you're probably going to want to move away from the alternative income form, but you can still collect it, and we'll talk about when it may be used. But because of its value and because you need to collect it, instead of overwhelming people. So the benefits form, so students who are not directly certified, right? We talked about those, or categorically eligible. If a student is enrolled at a CEP school or at a Provision 2 school in the non-base year, they need it. You don't need to submit a UBA if you're directly certified or categorically eligible. And of course, if you're at a standard counting and claiming school, you just would submit your National School Lunch Program form. So what records do you need to keep to CALPADS for students to be identified as eligible? So you need to have the enrollment records that show students were enrolled at any time during the eligibility period in a school participating in the federal meals program, records showing if students were directly certified or if they were categorically eligible. And then the CDE's education data collection system must have records submitted as part of the supplemental SumBucks collection. So EDCS, if you're at a district or charter school that serves high schools, you may be aware of this system already. It's been used for other data collections. But if you're in an elementary school district or an elementary charter school, you probably have not seen this before. But the EDCS is a kind of external submission system or platform, and that's where the UBAs are going to be collected. And more details about that will be forthcoming from CDE in an upcoming flash, I'm guessing. Additionally, though, we want to note that just because you've collected, if you move to collecting the UBAs, you still want to submit. You still want to make sure that you have the 181, 182 records in CALPADS. Students would not be eligible for the SumBucks. They're not pulling the data straight from CALPADS. They're actually merging the data between CALPADS and the EDCS system for verification purposes. But the 181 and 182 records alone will not suffice. So you have to have a UBA or a National School Lunch Program record in the SSBC in order to get your SumBucks qualifications. But you definitely want to have those 181 and 182 records because they're used for other purposes. So it's also used for that's how we identify the unduplicated pupil count. It's also important for grants, Title I information, things like that. And so for the best practices moving forward, particularly in light of the timeline, the July 1 deadline for the upcoming summer, the CDE is recommending focusing on collecting those UBAs from those students who are not directly certified or who are categorically eligible. So those would be students who had an alternative income form last year that was submitted earlier in the 24-25 year, or students who turned in the AIF or the National School Lunch Program application in the base year for Provision 2 or CEP school, and were improved for inclusion in the unduplicated pupil count, which just kept rolling forward. You want to make sure that they have those. So these are students who have not had the new form submitted. You want to make sure to target those students first so you can ensure that they get their information. So the data is already being pulled right now from CALPADS, at least starting in March 1st. And then they're going to begin pulling from the EDCS beginning July 1st. And then that SSBC data is going to be merged with CALPADS data, which I mentioned, and provided to the CDSS for the issuance of the benefit cards. And I think the cards will come out in June, and maybe Shaun will be able to answer that question. Or they start rolling out. I don't think they come out at exactly the same time. And let me just see if we've got any questions. All right. So, and Shaun, welcome aboard. Yeah, Shaun.
Morning.
Good
Thank you for
morning.
having me as always.
Can a CEP district still use the AIF for LCFF and the UBA for sunbucks? That's a great question. Yes, you can, but I think over time they're probably going to want to move away from that, right, Shaun? The alternate income form,
Correct.
mostly because the UBA will also serve your needs for LCFF criteria. So, but Shaun, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was agreeing. I'm sorry. I thought you heard me, Evan.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Yes, they can use the AIF currently. However, like you said, yes, we are trying to move away from the AIF because basically the UBA will collect all of that information, and there will be no need for it. Basically, their students will be either directly certified or ultimately everyone will be using the UBA versus using the alternate income form, or what's the other one?
The NSLP, the National School Lunch Program.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Alex,
Sorry,
go ahead.
forgot an acronym that quickly.
Alex, raise your hand. Go ahead. Come off. You can come off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up to my question. And the reason why I asked that question is because I explained the UBA and all of this stuff that's happening to my CBO, and their stance was basically they don't really care about sunbucks. They're more concerned about LCFF, and their thought process is, I just want to continue doing the AIF. You deal with UBA with nutrition services, and that will just free them up for their concerns. So I was asking that question because I want to come back to them and say, hey, we need to move to the UBA instead of trying to do this dual AIF and UBA system. And so I'm wondering, is any of this information being communicated out there to CBOs about this? Because their concern really is about LCFF. They don't really have a big concern about the Sunbucks program. So just making sure they're aware that, hey, you're going to eventually have to make that change.
Shaun, do you think it's going to be phased out eventually, the AIF?
I was on mute. Sorry. So yes, that's basically what the flash is stating, that the AIF will be phased out and ultimately it will be the UBA. Whether or not it's being communicated to CBOs, if your CBO is a part of your CALPADS notifications, then yes. If not, per that signed contract from your superintendent or your charter executive officer, we rely heavily on the CALPADS people to communicate or share that information out. That's why we highly recommend those team meetings that are already codified and already in a frequency that's occurring. Are the program offices communicating out? Yes, they are, but who they're specifically communicating out with, I can't. I don't have that information, again, only because I'm the CalPADS office. I'm not that program office, so I don't know what their listservs look like for communication and directing messages to them. Do I know that nutrition services, their offices, are they communicating out? Yes, I do. Again, if it's your specific nutrition director or if they've joined those listservs or so, again, I can't speak to that sadly because those are those CDE program offices. And again, I don't have access to those listservs. We have access to the CalPADS office listserv. So I would either recommend sharing the information. I know once upon a time, Evan's predecessor, Jessica Conkle, created a very wonderful communication sheet that was shared as part of like our resources and toolbox for LACO, and that's how I would directly share information back with the different directors that I needed to, and I would try and I love that communication sheet because it actually had me to be able to segregate what was just important to that specific role. So if it was concerning special education, then I could direct that just to our special education director at the time, or if it was just to our nutrition director. So Evan and Hillary, I don't know if we still have that sheet. I know I have a used copy.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll find a new one. I also
Okay.
think, Alex, that you have a little more incentive for students since there's money. I mean, I might point that out to your CBO that
To
the
use
Sunbucks
UBA.
taxes, even the alternate income forms, are sometimes hard to gather because there's no upside. You're trying to make a kind of a for the good of the whole. Please fill this form out. Whereas Sunbucks, there's money, so it might be easier to get parents to fill that out. Jaime asked, and then Lydiette was kind enough to offer him whether the Sunbucks training was canceled because of that Zoom outage will be rescheduled, and Lydiette dropped in the information for registration. Thanks for that. We'll add that to our information in Canvas as well. Thanks so much for that. Jan asked a tough question. Isn't the AIF a good way to isolate what families to target getting the UBA submitted, especially since they need to audit a percentage of all UBAs collected? That's a good question. I'll have to ponder that one, Jan. Can we collect a UBA form electronically? I know Paula answered this last week. That you can get a wet, you don't need a wet signature on that form. So yes, you can collect that electronically.
Please
So-
follow the guidance though for retention information though, and your typically it's your CWA who has that information. And so as long as you are following that in accordance with the electronic collection of it, then yes, your LEA is correct and good with that.
And then David asks, since CDE did not recommend a specific office to oversee Sunbucks activities, rather making it a local decision, there's some confusion. And he wonders what other LEAs are doing. Is there a consensus in the field as to who might be leading this? Nutrition services, child welfare and attendance, Shelley, that's CWA's child welfare and attendance.
Yeah, sorry. David, what do you mean by CDE did not recommend a specific office to oversee Sunbucks activities?
Hey, Paul, or hey, Sean. Good morning.
How are
Yeah,
you?
Paula had mentioned because there's confusion in my LEA, like which office handles this. We thought it was nutrition services, but it was at one of the meetings or town halls, or I think it was a town hall where it's on a slide. It says, you know, it's up to you guys. It's up to your LEA to determine who handles it. But without clear-cut guidance, I think everyone's looking at everyone else to say, oh, no, it's your responsibility. No, you're doing it. You're doing it. So it's just kind of confusing for us.
I'd like to see that slide. Yes. So I know and thanks Evan for laughing. Because I was like, yep, I get it, Sean. And so as the CDE, no, we cannot state what office is we cannot deem for an LEA which office will oversee an item, because again, that is going to be dependent to that LEA and again, what resources they have. But should your UBA be tied into your nutrition services? Yes, that is. And I thought that was stated in that flash when I reviewed it, because that goes back to something that's posted in the CALPADS user manual.
Thanks, Sean. I'll look for that and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, if you can just email that to me directly, David, that'd be great. And just highlight the specific ambiguity there. And then if so, I can make sure that we try and clarify that in the next Q&A.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Rocio asks about the retention practices again. Is there a website that can be searched to see what are the retention requirements? It's under Ed Code, I believe, and I can post that in a follow-up, unless you know it off the top of your head, Sean.
I don't know it off the top of my head. I just know I go to the CDE website and I think I look at like retention manual or something, because it's everything that's retention, not just student data, staff data and everything that the LEA is responsible for legally holding on to, and the time periods that they're holding on to it for.
Yeah, I'll follow up and make sure that you have that information, because that gets asked around all sorts of things around all the state and federal programs, and it seems like it's either 3 or 5 years, but knowing which one is which is always helpful.
Yeah,
And
Tara was over it for our office, so I called Kim next to her every time.
so in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward. I know that Sunbucks had a lot of questions, but just a few things. I wanted to make sure we had some resources, and I got a call the other day from an assistant superintendent saying, "Hey, when is the dashboard coming out this year?" And it's like, you may remember this. We have an updated timeline for the dashboards based on SB 114. So November 15th of this year, that's the statutory requirement. After that, the 2026 dashboard statutorily has to be published by October 15th and will continue to be published on that date moving forward. So you're going to get a lot of data dropping at the same time. So of course, who's impacted by this? CalPADS end of year submission is definitely, you've seen it adjusted this year, and moving forward, there's going to be some ongoing adjustments, because the majority of the data that's pulled in comes through at the end of the year, comes through couple sources. You've got the CAS data that forms the academic indicators, and you've got your chronic absenteeism, you've got your suspension data, all this stuff that's reported at the end of year. And so of course, in line with that, then you've got this new statutory requirement that any districts or county offices, not charter schools, but districts, county offices who fail to submit CalPADS data according to processes and timelines can be identified for technical assistance, which, that's not the end of the world, but if you don't get stuff in on time or your data is not accurate, you could end up with being identified. So this year, 24-25, if you fail to certify data by the final certification deadline, you'd be eligible. Next year, moving forward, though, and again, the timeline keeps moving up. Not only would it be the certification by the final deadline, but also data quality issues, which I know we have those, right? We have, oh, gee, our A through G rate just plummeted, inexplicably, or our percentage of one student group got dropped in half because of enrollment practices. So things like that do happen, but those then could be reasons for identification for technical assistance. It's or we call it differentiated assistance. That'd be 1 year. So of course, we're very mindful of the fact that it's important to have your processes aligned, and that was kind of the whole purpose of this ongoing statewide training series, to help you as the CalPADS coordinator bring in more people to make sure that your data is in on time and that it's clean. And so this year, we have this updated deadline for the end of year for the July 25th, with that amendment window deadline of August 8th. And the recommendation for this year is that there'll be 0 fatal errors by July 11th. So this is a really, quick turnaround this year. And there is a little bit of a challenge, and I maybe ask Shaun to talk about it with regards to that August 8th deadline. And even though we've decoupled the end of year and the cohort processing, if you have those students, the summer grads who graduate between August 8th and August 15th, that does present another new issue. But let me just share a couple of the resources, then we can open up for questions before we close. I'm just going to skip through these. So one of the things, this is what I talk about, new information, and Shaun, I'd love to hear you weigh in on this, is a change to the recommended order of certification. And I just heard about this the other day, and I saw it. I did see it pop up in the end of year roadmap, and just kind of a tiny little spot. But the recommendation now, and this is my colleague Rebecca's order. The recommendation is to certify end of year 3 prior to end of year 4 to reduce the number of errors, right? So the exit dates are recorded for students with disabilities. So 3 has the, all that short-term, primary, short-term, and secondary registration or enrollment information. So it'll make your data more accurate to get that done first. So that's a fairly recent change. And so I don't know that everybody had that on the radar, but that is now the recommended order. I put end of year 2, and I know this is why Rebecca did end of year 2, because it's much more straightforward to get this kind of knocked out. I don't think that end of year 2 is significantly impacted to the point where end of year 3 should precede that. But just wanted to make sure everybody's familiar with this. And then I hate to rush through these, some bucks was probably longer than I had anticipated. But just in terms of how all the data that are reported at end of year that you're familiar with, this is what I really thought was important. Are all these people being involved with the process? Your CTE staff, your site staff, your counselors, particularly for all the end of year data around work-based learning and CTE completion. Anything that goes into the dashboard college career indicator probably should be viewed by some of the counselors. And then end of year 2, your program staff for your Title I, site administrators, and end of year 3 is when you really need to pull in a lot of folks, right? Your CWAs, your child welfare and attendance, people who supervise that, your EL services to validate your reclassification, any district administrators, and of course your special education staff and any NPS staff. And then end of year 4, of course, both end of year 3 and 4 have to be certified by your CELPA. So the CELPA director should be involved in end of year 4 and special education staff for that as well. This is I've got the link in our agenda for today, but this is actually the agenda from the CalPADS statewide leadership series. And if you weren't able to attend, like I said, it's actually happening right now. I can't remember which county is doing it today, but great stuff in here, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. And I've included that link to this agenda both in the presentation and on our CalPADS page. But one of the things that opens up is this amazing cohort planning for timeline for administrators, which has numerous links inside it for each of the end of the year submissions, and it gives you a quick way to kind of organize for the end of year process. So this is something that you could share out. It was really designed more for district administrators, so it's something you could share with them to help build their understanding of all that goes into the end of year and the programs. So take it. You click on the link. Again, this is in the agenda as well. And it'll give you a forced copy, so you can take it and modify it to your specific needs and put in the people's names and use it as an organizing tool. And then I've got this also linked in the agenda for today. This is the end of year and other cohort resources that Rebecca had shared, and it's some of the recordings on it are a few years old, but not a lot has changed. But it has links to a number of excellent resources for making sure you've got all the information you need. The report mapping guides for the CTE completer and participant, the work-based learning reports. So each of the report mapping that links back to the CalPADS CSIS page, really helpful to have it all in one place. And with that, I'm going to take a few minutes for Shaun to help me answer the questions. Let's see. So Eric had asked a question to the group: any new information regarding the fire affected families who transferred districts due to home school burned? Oh, that's a great question, Eric. Shaun, do you know anything about that? Whether or not they need to go through the same process for interdistrict transfer for the 25-26 school year? Eric, you're at San Marino, so you probably had some students affected or coming in.
They've actually moved into your area, though. They're not an interdistrict transfer student. If they're physically residing in your area because sadly they have no home, then their district of residence is now your school, but they can still be homeless and have a residence within your school, within your LEA boundaries. So an intra-district transfer, that would be at the local agency, though.
I'll make sure I'll put something in there, Eric, in the follow-up to kind of nail that down. Thank you, Shaun.
No problem. Yeah. And please make sure to submit those students their program records, because again, it was too late for the current academic year. However, many of those families might still be homeless due to the fact that I think only 5% have broken ground.
Oh,
Yeah, and the Palisades, and although the city has relaxed a lot of the paperwork confinements, it's still taking them time, and I think the phase one of the cleanup process was just completed a week or two ago.
And actually, just on a positive note, Palisades High School reopened today at the old Sears building in Santa Monica. So that's pretty cool. A lot of kids we know who are back in school today who are remote, but now have an actual physical location. So
It
that was
really
cool.
was. So thank you to LAUSD for their support, SMMUSD, the city of Santa Monica, their mayor, stepped up and really did a great job in helping that turn around in 30 days' time.
Let's see. Laura asks, do we have to add another free and reduced record for students who move within our LEA when a student leaves a school, that the free and reduced end date automatically updates based on the school exit date?
The student is within your LEA and they're just doing if the student is already within your district and they're just doing a transfer within your district, then the program record just moves because you've already ascertained that you've already ascertained whether or not the student is free or reduced. And so you just move that record to the student with the same record to the new school. If the student is transferring brand new into your district from another separate district, then yes, they should be completing whichever paperwork it is, whether it's the income form or the NSLB. I think I got the acronym right. Evan, correct me if I'm wrong. Application, the meal
Yeah.
application.
Yeah, and we got both Alex and Jaime weighed in with their process confirming that. And then Jaime noted that the Sunbucks, the new updated webinar for April 16th overlaps with the special education roadshow for LA County. So that's a bummer. Maybe that'll be recorded though. I don't know. That seems like something they may record because it's need to know. So hopefully we'll get it out if they do record it. Leonid weighs in, the new end of year submission deadline is not reasonable for county offices. I mean, yeah, I think the CD is very aware of the challenges posed by county offices with students who are in school through June 30th. So Shaun hears you. I know that they've heard us, CD has heard us at the county office meetings as well. This is a real challenge.
It is, but due to the dashboard guidance that's written into statute, we have no choice but to ramp up the deadlines. And so superintendents provided their feedback when we were collecting the information at that time, and we made the best decisions based upon your feedback at that time, along with what we are required to do by statute.
Shaun, are there some potential shifts next year in the submissions that'll maybe expedite things or make it a little bit easier for end of year?
We've done our best there's the current game plan that is on the CALPAD, the CSIS channel, not
The
if
YouTube
you
channel?
go into the CSIS channel and you just type in game plan in the search bar, Evan, it has the game plan there, and we've intentionally ramped up that roadmap and game plan because we realized that the LAA's the work is it's decreasing at the end of the school year by 2 weeks, but many LEAs have chosen to begin their school year earlier to be able to align with it. I know LAUSD played a large part in that, in being able to do so. The fact that most of your information still goes until this year, like August 15th, although school years might not end until 6:30. That's great. You still have until August 15th to be able to get in your graduate data. You have until, what is it, August 8th in order to complete your EOY data though. And so most LEAs, again, have just begun schools, a week or two earlier in order to accommodate both students and staff and their dashboard numbers.
All right, thank you. And I see David dropped in the link to the FAQ. So there's the evidence that
Thank you, David.
So Shaun, thank you for joining us. I went on kind of long. Maybe we need to expand next year, meet a little bit longer, but I don't want to leave our SIS vendors who've been so gracious to show up waiting too long in their rooms. But I do want to remind you, if you weren't here earlier, we'd love your feedback, plus the feedback for next year about some potential topics that we can add to our standard. We'll do our 3 meetings just like this year, where we bring updates relative to what's coming out of the regional meetings, what's coming out of the CALPADS flashes, but also we'd like to do some possible specific topics designed to address bottlenecks or pain points that people find they have in trying to collect the data, with the goal being to expand, again, the people who support you, not just all CalPads people, but who are the people that need to know, whether it's counselors or CTE folks or whoever it is, CIS. So please fill out this form. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And then the SIS vendor link is, Karina dropped it in the chat. And I really appreciate how many of you take all the time to be here. It is always humbling to spend the time that we do to pull this meeting together, because we realize just how much you guys have to know. It's remarkable that you keep it all together with all the demands on your time. So appreciate all the work you do. And for any of you who may be moving on, I know I didn't see anybody put anything, but I have heard, through the grapevine, there may be a couple of retirees. Please let us know. We'd love to reach out to say goodbye at least. But we wish you the best of luck. And at that, I'll close down the presentation and let you get off to the vendor breakouts. And we have today Power School, Aries, and Karina, remind me, who am I forgetting?
Infinite.
Infinite. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the vendors for being here.